So welcome everybody to the second roundtable of the TribalP2Action online series. Today's focus is on landscaping strategies for saving water and money at tribal businesses and other facilities. So just to clarify too that we've had many non-tribal related participants here, and the concepts, strategies, best practices, and other information we're sharing is really applicable to any organization, any business, any facility. So if you're a nonprofit, if you work for a government and are trying to serve government facilities and buildings, you'll still likely gain as much value as somebody focused on tribal businesses. So we really appreciate having you here today, and just want to give a bit of an overview of the TribalP2Action Project for those who have not participated in the other webinars that we had up to this point. So the Intertribal Pollution Prevention Project is an EPA grant-funded project that was received by the Pala Band of Mission Indians. So the Pala tribe is overseeing this project, and we are working with them in San Pasqual on several of their businesses. So this is a collaboration between the Pala Band, San Pasqual Band of Mission Indians, the US EPA, Prosper Sustainably, Wood Environmental, and others as well. And so we appreciate all the contributions we've had in participation throughout this project so far. The project itself has two major components to it. The kind of first and main driver has been the local pollution prevention assessments and action planning, focusing on Pala and San Pasqual businesses. And so that's included the Pala's Casino Spa and Resort, 5 different agribusinesses, including avocado, citrus groves, as well as a vineyard, the Fox Motocross Raceway, Paul's RV Resort, gas station and mini mart, the transfer station, fleet department, and wastewater treatment plant. And then we've also been focusing on San Pasqual's Woods Valley Golf Club. And we've been going more in depth on these specific facilities in the webinars, and those are all recorded. You can go back to those. We're not recording the roundtable discussions. We want this to be a free-flowing discussion and nobody to feel like what they say will be made public and be available. But the webinars themselves that are kind of more general content training type style the first one's posted, and the second and third ones will be posted hopefully today. So as part of the kind of local P2 assessment and action planning, we're also trying to do local employee training at these facilities and working with them in arranging green teams for participation. And this webinar series, or the online series, is part of the national P2 training capacity building part of this program, which we're calling the TribalP2Action Project. And there's a website, TribalP2Action.org. And there are 5 webinars. We've done 3 so far and 3 roundtables, and this is the second. The focus last week was on hazardous substances. This week, the focus is on water. Next week is on energy, and then we're wrapping it up with implementation and training in the final week. So here's the schedule and the topics we're covering. I encourage you to to go back and review any of these if you weren't able to participate, and continue to share this information both about the future webinars and about the upcoming webinars as well. And we're likely going to kind of try to send out another announcement at the end of this week or early next week to encourage participation through the remainder of the series. And all events start at 10 a.m. Pacific time and run for 90 minutes. So we'll run through introductions right now. Shasta Gaughan is the environmental director for the Pala Band of Mission Indians. She was unable to make it today. She typically is kind of the lead MC on getting us started and kicked off. I didn't make Heidi step up and do that in her place, but Heidi is here for Pala, and she'll provide a little more information on her background in just a few minutes. And I'll walk us through one by one who each person is. But Jessica, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks, Josh. Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica Counts Arnold, and I'm a Pollution Prevention Coordinator at the US EPA Region 9, and I'm also the project officer for this grant. We appreciate tribes learning and implementing P2, so we appreciate Paula's efforts and looking forward to more trainings. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. John?
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Joe Flores. I'm the Environmental Director and Water Manager for the San Pasqual Band of Mission Indians. To be here today.
Thank you, John. So I'm Josh Simmons with Prosper Sustainably. We are the lead consulting group on this project. Prior to working on this project with Pala, or prior to starting Prosper Sustainably, I was the environmental director for the Santa Ynez Band of Chumash Indians, so the counterpart to John and Shasta for that tribe. Michael Burr.
Good morning. Yes, I'm Michael Burr. I'm the director of Microgrid Institute and also principal consultant at Burr Energy LLC. We work with tribes and other communities on energy resilience and sustainability projects, including microgrids, may come as no surprise. For this series of webinars and the whole program, I'm mostly supporting energy assessments and efforts around that, but happy to be involved in this webinar today, and I'll be taking a lot of notes and helping facilitate the conversation.
Thank you, Michael. Scott?
Hello, everybody. My name is Scott Brown. I'm a senior scientist with Wood Environment and Infrastructure Solutions, formerly known as Amy Foster Wheeler. My background is mostly in hazardous material and hazardous waste management. I've been kind of the point man for doing the work with Pala, the groundwork with Pala and San Pasqual during the P2 effort, looking at primarily both hazardous substances and water P2 opportunities.
Great, thanks, Scott. And I'd like to have today's experts. John Flores is kind of included in both the P2 team and as an expert today. He's already introduced himself, but I want to allow Brian to introduce himself.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Brian Longbottom. I work with Scott with Wood Environment. I'm a civil engineer with the company. But the real reason I'm on the call is I was a Navy Civil Engineer Corps officer and Public Works Director for the last 20 years. So I retired last year. Ironically, I was the Public Works Officer up at Naval Air Weapons Station, China Lake for the last 4 years and have a lot of fairly recent experience with water conservation, Sigma, all of that type of things, and just the relationship between federal, state, county, municipal, you name it, just the interaction of everything. So just here to kind of share my experiences and give people some food for thought to think about as they move forward with any actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Oh, sorry, Brian. Thank you, Brian. Just to let you know, Brian, too, I don't know what context you were provided, but we have a national audience while we're based in California for this project too. So we may need to explain Sigma and other things for some other folks who are not based in California, but we can get to that in a moment. Joanna?
Yes, hi there, everybody. I'm Joanna Kind. I'm a senior scientist for Eastern Research Group, and we're the technical support contractor for EPA's WaterSense program. I've led the outdoor side developing specs for water efficient products and other water efficient practices outdoors in the irrigation and landscape realm since the inception of the program back in 2006. So I'm happy to be here today. Thanks.
Glad you could make it, Joanna. Joanna was a very late ad that we were excited to have. So thanks for joining us on such short notice. And Heidi.
Hi, so I'm Heidi Brown. I work for the Pala and Mission Indians. I've been here for about 15 years and I'm their water resource specialist. So I kind of cover everything from drinking water compliance to surface water, groundwater monitoring, a lot of outreach and education and a bunch of stuff in between.
And Heidi's got dual screens going. You'll see her audio coming up with her picture, but she does have video with a little bit of a smoky background of the beautiful back of mountains in back. So this is the agenda for today. In just a moment, we'll come back to having everybody introduce themselves who's joined us so far. And then we'll dive straight into the content. We're really going to kind of try to weave this discussion throughout the content we're presenting. And then we want you to submit both questions written through the chat box, but also you can raise your hand and speak directly to us as well. Before we dive in, I want to give just, again, a little kind of brief overview of pollution prevention as a reminder. So pollution prevention is any practice that reduces, eliminates, or prevents pollution at its source. I like to think of, this pollution prevention to me is environmental sustainability, or also thought of as greening. Water conservation, I would say, is what the focus is in terms of if you're focusing on water. You can go to EPA's pollution prevention website. The pollution prevention program is pursuant to the Pollution Prevention Act passed by Congress and provides funding and resources and technical assistance that are available to communities throughout the U.S. to work on these types of matters. And EPA also has its WaterSense program. Joanna is going to actually tell us about that in just a minute. And then another resource that may be of interest is the Federal Energy Management Program Best Management Practices for Water Efficiency. The Department of Energy and others have recognized that there is a nexus between water use and energy use, and certainly there are pollution impacts resulting from both. And so this could be a valuable resource to reduce pollution and save both water and energy for your business or other facility. Okay, so I'm going to pull up Joanna's slides right now. And Joanna, take it away, please.
Great. Thanks again for having me. And I believe it was Jason who said, I'm just looking at my notes, you're in New Mexico. I forgot to mention, I'm also located in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And though I work with folks in DC, I moved here about 10 years ago. So maybe we'll run into each other at some point locally here. So I'm going to provide a quick overview of the program. I'm not sure how many folks on the call are familiar with WaterSense, but in case you're not, I wanted to give a brief background of the entire program, and then we can focus in on the outdoor side since that's what we're focused on today. So this is a voluntary program, and it helps consumers identify water efficient products, programs, practices, and homes. I think most of you, if you are familiar with the program, you're used to seeing this label here. It's on a lot of the labeled programs in big box stores that you'll see, Lowe's, Home Depot, etc. So we achieve these goals by partnering with a variety of agencies. We partner with utilities and local governments, manufacturers, retailers, and distributors. And I'm going to talk about labeled products a little more in detail in a minute. But I do want to mention that the products that are labeled are independently certified for water efficiency and performance. And I think you all know the importance of that with the old products in the past, the low flow toilets and whatnot that have gotten a bad rep. So we make sure they perform well and consumers are happy with them. Next slide, please. So WaterSense takes a three-pronged approach to reach these goals. And we call them the 3 Ps, which are practices, products, and people. So for example, with practices, there's a commercial best management practices document called WaterSense at Work. I'll talk a little bit more about later. That's up here. We also have a water efficient landscape guide. I think that might be helpful for a lot of folks on the call. To address products, we have the labeling program, which I'll get into in a little bit more detail. And then for people, like I mentioned, we partner with a variety of agencies to promote water efficiency. Okay, next slide. So I know we're focused on the outside today, but I do want to mention, for those of you not familiar, it's for all types of water using products. So indoors, we're currently looking at systems. These are the products that have specifications for them to date. It shows you when the spec was published and also how many labeled models there are. So you'll see there's a variety of plumbing products on there. There are 2 irrigation products on there. You can find a list of labeled models on the website, and I can give you that address at the end of the presentation. And if there's time, we can also kind of go through the website if anybody is interested. Okay, next slide. So as I mentioned, I want to focus on the outdoor side. And really where I want to start are the products. And I'll do the 3 Ps. But this is the one that is very effective. We spend a lot of time and effort identifying water efficient products in irrigation systems. Right now, that's where we're focused. Currently, there are 2 products that have the label you can look for. So if you have irrigation professionals you're working with, you can encourage them to install WaterSense labeled products. You can look for them yourselves. Right now, that's weather-based irrigation controllers. So these are products that use weather data, and you program data in about your landscape. And I'm currently looking at mine over my computer. And instead of just the regular set schedule that you say, okay, I'm doing 20 minutes 3 times a week, and I'm going to do that the whole irrigation system, these products kind of follow the weather curve, and they change the schedule when the weather changes. And that's how they're really effective at saving water. We also have labeled sprinkler bodies, and WaterSense is recognizing products, sprinkler bodies, that can regulate flow regardless of incoming pressure. So they're essentially pressure regulating sprinkler bodies that are tested for performance. And this is an issue when there's high pressure, which is very common in many parts of the United States. And then lastly, we're in the process of doing and developing a spec for soil moisture sensors that help schedule irrigation efficiently. So these products sense moisture in the soil, and when it's time for the controller to water, it checks in with the sensor, and it either allows or disables irrigation based on a threshold that you set. So it essentially skips an irrigation cycle if there's enough moisture in the soil. We're hoping that specification comes out in the next year, so you can be looking for that.
I want to pause here for
sure.
I want to pause here for a moment and just ask, I mean, is everybody here familiar with WaterSense, and has anybody used any WaterSense products? I'm seeing a head shake from Mikey, or just familiar with these types of technologies. I think soil moisture sensors are something that Heidi Pala is using at least in one of their agricultural groves, correct?
Oops. Yes, sorry. Yeah, we have soil moisture sensors at one of our groves as a pilot program, and some tentative plans to kind of expand that into other groves. But I like that I'll be able to use the WaterSense guidelines later when you guys develop those for that. I wrote that down because I didn't know that you were, yeah.
Excellent. I should mention, I think a lot of the manufacturers in ag may seek the label, but generally the program is aimed at publicly used water, so from utilities. But we have seen a lot of agricultural-based soil moisture sensor manufacturers at conferences and shows, and they are expressing interest. So essentially what the spec will do is test the product to ensure it does what it's supposed to do. Does it do it well? Does it disable an irrigation and allow it precisely over time? So I think when that goes final, if you want to reach out to me, we can talk to you about what kind of products you're using and seeing if those manufacturers are interested.
Heidi, since we're on this topic right now, certainly you'll have more opportunity to discuss the various strategies and best management practices that Paula is employing. But how is it going with the soil moisture sensors? Is it working well? What have been some of the what have been some of the benefits? What have been some of the challenges you've experienced with this technology?
So I will say that our grove manager is not into technology at all. So that has been one of the drawbacks that, like in order to make this useful for our system, you have to go online and kind of still look at what the soil moisture sensors are reading and then adjust your watering schedule, because at that grove, the watering irrigation stuff is very manual. So that has been one drawback, that our grove manager likes it, but doesn't use it as consistently as I think, it really would be powerful if he could. So we're trying to work around that and maybe work with his admin. But I will say, I pop on and look at it, and it really is a powerful tool to tell you when you should be watering, how much you should be watering. And other other grove managers in the surrounding area have started to use it. So I know Palma Tribe uses it pretty regularly, and their grove manager loves it. It's just that for ours, because he doesn't do any technology, that has been a little bit of a drawback for him. So if we could integrate it into the system where he doesn't have to touch it, I think that would probably be our next step, and that would be a beneficial thing. So that's just, other tribes have different levels, so that might be something that others would run into too.
It seems that, you don't want to have to be monitoring the soil moisture sensor outputs on a daily basis to make those adjustments. So it seems to me, if you can pair that with the weather-based irrigation, or just, with a controller, irrigation controllers that automatically make adjustments based on those. But, certainly that requires a certain level of infrastructure that needs to be installed. So Heidi, are there thoughts kind of on how to, what are the expectations? Are you working toward developing that level of controls, or is it just a matter of getting the groves manager to be monitoring this on a regular basis and making adjustments? Or do you find maybe you don't need to be making daily adjustments, maybe it's weekly or maybe it's monthly?
So I think how we're wanting to phase this in is we're really looking for grant projects or grant funding to upgrade the irrigation systems that we do have, so that we're able to integrate the soil moisture sensors in with that newer technology. A lot of our irrigation tech at the groves it's very old school. So I think rather than training our grove manager to change how he's doing it, I think we're just looking to upgrade our systems, because they're kind of at the end of their lifespan anyways. And he has a lot of interest in doing that because he does see the value in it. So we're trying to look for grant funding to put into those programs and to kind of, stagger them in. So that's kind of where we're at. And we've incorporated into other planning work that we've done. We're doing some ag irrigation efficiency planning with a BOR grant starting this fall. So hopefully we'll be able to incorporate that into the plan and then go after more grant funding to actually put those systems in. So
I think it'll be particularly interesting for people to understand what are some of the potential funding sources. Bureau of Reclamation sounds like I'm aware, but what funding sources are you looking at or monitoring to potentially use?
So Bureau of Reclamation is a great one. The only problem with that is it's a 50% match, which is a little bit steep. So we have to make sure that our council is totally on board, because it is such a large match. But they have a bunch of different water conservation related programs, and they can do on the ground work. So we're looking at some of those, and we have 2 BOR grants right now to do planning stages for that. Another great one is the BIA, the Bureau of Indian Affairs Water Resource Program. They have funding, not quite as much, seems like not as much as BOR has, but those are a little bit easier to get and much easier grants to manage. So we're looking at going after some of those. I think there's also state funding, which John might talk about later, because I know that he's used some of those funds. That it's a much larger pot, and that would only be pertinent to California. So since we don't have California people, maybe I would skip over that. But yeah, so those are the 2 main ones that we're looking at.
How about USDA? Have you maybe Paul is not as eligible based on census tracts, but certainly ag activities would fall under. Okay.
Yeah, that's, I know that we've gotten USDA funding for other projects, and I haven't, even though it's on my list, I haven't really delved into that for the ag irrigation, but that's a good point that I think I probably will look into.
I would encourage anybody, working with tribes or not, to look at USDA for not just grants, but also loans and technical assistance. I believe they offer as well. Okay, well, we'll definitely be coming back to you, Heidi, a bit later. And Joanne, I'll go to the next slide for you.
Great. So now I'm going to move off of products and talk a little bit about working with people and practices. So in addition to the labeled products, one of the first things WaterSense wanted to do to address outdoor water use was recognize professionals that had a background in water efficiency and promote those professionals nationally. So we do that by recognizing existing professional certification programs that certify professionals in irrigation design, auditing, and installation and maintenance. So currently there are 6 labeled auditor programs. There's 1 installation and maintenance program and 1 irrigation design program that have been recognized for incorporating water efficiency into their program. And currently there are over 3,000 professionals that have gone through these programs. I had a note in here, approximately 1,700 of those are in California, because I thought we would have some California folks on. But it's just to note here, a lot of the folks who do that have opportunities in California. Several of the programs we have are there. The Qualified Water Efficient Landscaper program you all might have heard of, that's out of Sonoma, Marin. The California Landscape Contractors Association, they have hundreds of certified professionals. So there's a list of these folks on the WaterSense website. If you are interested in hiring a professional that has a background in water efficiency, they have to take an exam, etc. You can find them on the WaterSense website. They're spec'd a lot as well. So I put the link here, but we can also navigate there later if anybody's interested in seeing that live.
Thank you, Joanna. And actually, we have had a few more people join, including some from California. So we are welcome to those. Bruce, Sherry, Cindy, and Dolly. So thanks for joining us. Okay, take it away, Jonah.
Okay. And then beyond labeling of products and programs, WaterSense also develops a lot of outreach materials. And several of these are available publicly, so you can have access to them without being a partner. A lot of them are available to partners only. So if you're a utility or you're a local government and you've partnered with WaterSense, there is a website with a password, and all of these materials are available to you. For example, we have the ones that are publicly available up on this slide are the micro irrigation guides. It just runs through, what is that, why you should use it. Very, very high overview of design and maintenance. We have a water efficient landscaping guide, as I mentioned. Again, that's available to the public. And then I have these other pieces up here. This is just a very small example of what we can provide to utilities and other organizations that are promotional partners, along with campaigns that we run. We have a sprinkler spruce up in March. This year we added mulch madness. And then we also help promote Smart Irrigation Month. So you'll see there's like a bill stuffer up here promoting weather-based irrigation controllers and things like that. And then I think we're ready for my last slide. I did want to touch base on the commercial sector. Again, there's a lot that WaterSense is doing on the commercial side. I just put a few examples up here. I know I mentioned WaterSense at Work. That's the BMPs for the commercial and institutional sector. It does cover landscape and irrigation. There are also some case studies in there that might be of interest to folks. We also have C&I assessment tools and like a simple water assessment checklist that you all can use. This is all available to the public. You don't have to be a partner to have access, but I encourage you, if you are in one of the partner categories, to look into that, and I can tell you how to go about doing that. There's also a series of webinars that WaterSense conducted jointly with Energy Star on a variety of C&I topics. And all of these materials can be found at the link here. And then again, if we have time and there's specific interests of folks, we can kind of zoom around the website and see some more of this work in detail. That is it for me. I wanted to keep it brief in case you all have questions. I did put up the email to the helpline. There's also a phone number. The general WaterSense website is there, and I can also provide my contact information as well.
Thank you, Joanna. I really appreciate it. Are there any burning questions we have for Joanna right now? Well, I know we only have Doug for about 20 more, or sorry, I apologize. Brian, I keep calling you different names. We only have you for about 20 more minutes, so I want to pass it over to you before you have to go. But any burning questions for Joanna about WaterSense, and we'll come back and have more time at the end as well. Okay, and I had some as well, but I'm gonna hold off on those right now and pass it over to Brian. All right, Brian, take it away.
All right, well, hey, good morning. I'll just real quick, since we have some new folks. The reason I'm on the call is I was a Navy Public Works officer, Public Works director before I retired a year ago. And so we did a lot of work in Central California in the Mojave Desert related not only to just water reduction in general, but also landscaping. So that's why I am here. I was the public works officer at China Lake for 4 years from 2014 to 18. And that was the same time period as California passed the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, which basically, for those not in California, meant that if you were in an overdraft situation in the water basin or critically overdraft, you had to present the state with a plan on how you were going to be sustainable. And most of that had to happen by 2020. So if they haven't submitted the plan at this point, they're already late. But that's where I come from. Just for some background and why this was such an important thing for China Lake. Naval Air Weapons Station China Lake. It's the premier naval aviation weapons center for the Navy. That's where everything's developed for all of our fighter jets. And so this little plot of land was picked out back in the 40s because it was in the middle of nowhere. There really wasn't any encroachment, and it allowed the Navy to do what it needed to do pretty much unimpeded. And so over the course of time, a small community, the city of Ridgecrest sprung up, agriculture came into the area, and the area really over the last 60 or so years has grown rapidly to the point where there's a 30,000 person population right outside the gate now. And so one of my jobs, not only maintaining the runways and the facilities and working with the installation leadership on maintaining the mission, is also looking at some of those things that happen outside of the perimeter fence that could impact our mission. And so you all might be familiar with terms like ACUs or encroachment of residential areas. It's predominantly characteristic of aviation bases where you have aircraft that take off and they actually have to launch over residential communities or over areas outside the fence line. And so one of the encroachment issues that we worry about is folks building houses in those areas because that can impede our mission. But the other thing that we also look at is natural and cultural resources. And so China Lake, just from a snapshot, is a 1.2 million acres. It's a huge installation. It's the largest installation in the Navy, the largest Navy landholding. And 1.2 million acres, what does that mean? That's slightly larger than the state of Rhode Island, for those of you that are interested. So it's a huge chunk of California. It's centered in the Indian Wells Valley. And within that valley, as I mentioned, we have the base, we have the city of Ridgecrest. There's 3 counties, San Bernardino, Inyo, and Kern all intersect. There's 3 very major agricultural producers in that area. And then there's the Indian Wells Valley Water District. So those are the big stakeholders. The annual recharge, natural recharge into that constrained and closed water basin is 5,000 acre feet. As a group, one team, we pull out about 45,000 acre feet a year. So we are using water at a tune of 9 times what Mother Nature's putting back into the ground. So anybody that can do math understands that if you're running your checkbook that way, you're going to be in trouble pretty quickly. So the Navy, looking at that and realizing, hey, if we run out of groundwater, we're not going to be able to have a mission or an installation here. About 10 years ago, really started looking at what can we do to reduce our water consumption. Now, sadly, the Navy's water consumption is only about 10%, so it's relatively small. Residential is about 20%, and then agricultural makes up the other 70%. But the Navy looked at its piece and decided, hey, what can we do? So we looked at all of the greenscapes that we had, as you can imagine, on a military installation: golf courses, soccer fields, baseball fields, just grass for the sake of grass so that it looks good. We looked at that and really made some hard decisions on, do we really need this? We're in the middle of a desert. What is it that's essential? What's not essential? So we went through the entire installation, starting really in 2014 when I got there. And we reduced basically our greenscape. That was the first thing that we did. We replaced, in order to keep the base still looking good, not just sand and desert everywhere, we looked at xeriscape options. We looked at anything that we could do to reduce our irrigation usage. And at that time, our irrigation was sweet water. It was potable water coming out of the reservoir underground. So we looked really at two facets: consumption and alternate use. And so the easiest one is the conservation. So we invested a lot of money in about over the course of 3 years. And I'm sorry, if you're following along in the slides, I can't stand PowerPoint. I hate slides. I did it for 20 years in the Navy, so I'm just talking. If anyone wants to say anything, by all means, speak up. But I'm sorry about the slides. So we invested about $15 million over the course of 2 years. And the thing that I want to tell you is, when you do xeriscaping, whether it's completely no water use xeriscaping or it's a reduced water use xeriscaping, in essence, it's replacing items that need sprinklers with desert-friendly and drought-tolerant plants and rock aggregate that look good to reduce your water consumption. You got to be very careful how you do it. One, it's expensive. Anybody that's ever done landscaping knows that to landscape an acre almost costs as much as it does to pave it in concrete. It is expensive. And you can do it wrong, and you can end up not saving any money at all. So some things I just want to point out: when you're looking at doing landscaping projects, these are some things that get overlooked. One is, make sure you have a coherent plan. Look at your entire property or your complex from a long-term planning perspective. Come up with what we would call a base appearance plan, exterior appearance plan. So make sure you have a plan on what you want things to look like. Xeriscaping can look really bad if you start putting a little of this here and a little bit of that there. There's no rhyme or reason to it. And from a architectural perspective and a landscape architect design perspective, it can really look bad. So that's your first step. Definitely have a coherent plan. The second thing is, don't get rid of the trees. A lot of folks think that trees are huge water users, and they're really not. Trees are really important in a desert environment. They keep the temperatures down. They actually reduce the water usage for any of the vegetation you leave in place. They're important. So when you're tackling xeriscaping, make room for the trees and leave the trees there to the greatest extent possible. There's all kinds of trees that you can replace heavy water users with that are drought tolerant, but trees are extremely important. The other thing is, as you're going through and you're designing what your system's going to look like, don't assume that trees are going to get enough water on their own. Definitely leave some type of drip irrigation in place for the trees. I saw a lot of cases in the Ridgecrest area outside of the fence, and even us, we made mistakes on our first couple go-arounds where we didn't provide enough water to the trees, and it really bit us down the road. The other thing is, xeriscape is not maintenance-free. Believe it or not, especially if you live in a desert environment, you need to be thinking about certain things like desert blow sand. Rocks, they hold sand very, very well. And so while you're thinking you're going to save a fortune on grass cutting and you're going to reduce water usage and energy usage, what you might find out if you don't do it the right way is you're going to be sucking sand out of your rocks every year at a very expensive cost. So be cognizant of that. There's different types of barriers you can put in place to protect your xeriscape. There's also different types of aggregate that work better than others related to trapping sand. Round river rock allows the sand to leave much easier than coarse, jagged edges, which kind of interlock. So that's something to think about there. The other thing to keep in mind is utilities. The last thing you want to do, especially if you're a utility provider, which the Navy is, we're our own utility provider, you don't want to go spend a couple of $1 million on Xeriscape and then have a water line break and go in there and have to dig it all back out to repair a water line. So while the sting from Xeriscape in the beginning, just the initial investment, is going to be fairly hefty, definitely consider relocating some of your utilities so they're not directly underneath your Xeriscaping to the greatest extent possible. Water lines will break, electrical lines will need to replace. It's a fact of life. It's not if it'll happen, it's when it'll happen. And where those are located relative to your investment in Xeriscaping is a critical component. The other thing to keep in mind related to conservation, and I should say, so we invested about $15 million over the course of 3 years. By the time all the projects were done and we could really take a good snapshot as I was departing in 2018, we reduced our water usage by 75%. So it was a massive undertaking. And so from a water use payoff, Xeriscaping pays off immediately, right? Because as soon as you get the project done, you're not watering grass, you're not paying for landscapers. So the payback happens relatively quickly. A lot of it has to do with what the cost of water is for you. If you produce your own water, maybe it's cheaper than if you're buying it from a water district. So your return on investment is going to vary greatly depending on what your source of water is. It's also going to vary greatly depending on what kind of initial investment. And so again, I go back to, I would caution going skimpy on that initial investment because you'll pay for it down the road. Do it right the first time. So related to conservation, if we shift over to different water sources, pulling water out of the ground or taking water from the water district and watering plants is relatively easy. The water lines are right then and there. But if you really come up with a good long-term strategy, one of the things that we did in China Lake is we partnered with the city of Ridgecrest and our wastewater treatment plant out there. And we actually made a deal with them through some real estate agreements to be able to take some of their water, which had received secondary treatment. We pumped it back onto the base, and we didn't take it to full tertiary treatment where it'd be potable and able to recharge, but we took it to what we called secondary plus. And we actually utilized a purple pipe system, and our entire golf course today is watered with wastewater that's been treated. So we don't use any potable water whatsoever on our golf course irrigation. So that's a huge water saver as well. The other thing that we did relative to the wastewater treatment plant working with the city is we invested in that plant to help get it up to a tertiary treatment perspective, such that if you ever get into an area where you're not using all of that treated wastewater from an agriculture or irrigation perspective, it's then able to be recharged back into the reservoir, into the ground. So, and that's an important thing because there are two real, I would say, critical risks that you face when you start drawing water down at the rate we are, 9 times recharge. The first one being, and the one that happens the quickest, private well owners, the water table falls, and it falls fast. And in Indian Wells Valley, it was falling about 2 feet a year. That's a lot. And so when you live in a community that's supported predominantly, as deserts are, by wells, you know, the depth of your well matters. And most residential private consumers can't afford to have a well 1,000, 2,000 feet down into the ground. And so what we started noticing right away, especially with the agricultural usage, is we were getting major conical effects and drawdown around some of these large industrial wells. And we had a lot of residential consumers out in town, some of which worked on the base. Their wells dried up. And so they had to invest a lot of money to go deeper. The other major problem that you have to be careful of, especially in a constrained aquifer like Indian Wells Valley, is not all the water in the ground is what we call sweet or potable. a lot of it's brackish, and it's not fit for consumption without significant amount of treatment. And if you can imagine, you know, you have all of this porous material underground and you pull all the good water out. Well, all that brackish water, it's the law of gravity. It starts going to the low places if it can flow. And if you're not careful, you can actually contaminate your sweet water reservoirs with brackish water if you draw them down too low. And so those are all things that we were kicking around and concerned with. And as I mentioned, we started doing this for the last 5 or 10 years. And as SGMA, that Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, kicked in, the Navy was we were ahead of the game, thankfully. We were able to help out the community a lot. You know, we had reduced our consumption between 67 and 75%. We had invested a lot of money in a water model that really mapped the entire Indian Wells Valley, where the sweet water was, where the brackish water was, where all the recharge was coming from, what the effects were of the various agricultural and industrial wells in the area. And we were able to help that the Groundwater Sustainability Agency that was put together with all of those stakeholders I mentioned, the 3 counties, the city, the Navy, Bureau of Land Management. It really helped to make some good decisions. And I think when you get into a community, depending on whether your particular commercial activity or whatever it is you're looking to reduce water from a xeriscaping perspective, if you're part of a community or part of someone that might be governed by SGMA in California, one of the most important things is to work together as a team. Don't let the legalities and everything stymie you, because you can very quickly get stalled out if you don't keep communicating and keep working together. And so I consider the China Lake story a success. We looked at the problem. I think we did a pretty good job. We had a lot of really good people working with us to help us make good decisions on investing upfront on xeriscaping. And being able to save, 75% or reduce consumption by 75% and get really your return on investment in about 5 years was a huge success for us and really helped out the community as a whole. So that's really my story. What I wanted to, I could talk about this for hours, but I'll stop there. And if anyone has any questions about any of that, I'm happy to answer some questions.
I do have a few, but I want to allow others an opportunity to ask questions first. Does anybody have any questions? You can either chat in the box, or you raise your hand, or just you can just even unmute yourself if you want. So just kind of jumping out on this slide, I'll ask, and somebody else can jump in at any point. $10 million investment, utility leak detection, repair, and recapitalization. It seemed fairly significant. How much of that is just from lines breaking themselves? Obviously monitoring that. How important is that? And then what's the cost associated with replacing, repairing those lines?
Yeah, I focus more on the landscaping aspects of it, and I should back up. We use a smart controller called CalSense. So it sounds very similar to the WaterSense, but a lot of that investment that we did, 10 million in the first couple of years, 15 as a whole. A lot of that, not only was the xeriscaping, was setting up a very robust network of CalSense controllers. We had 100% of our irrigation on smart controllers. We invested in a weather station that measured evapotranspiration. It talked to our CalSense system. So we didn't go so far as to have sensors in the soil, which I think makes it even, a more robust system. But the other thing that we did, and it really depends on the age of your infrastructure, right? Lines underground, depending on when they were constructed, whether they're clay tile, wastewater treatment lines, whether they're old cast iron potable water lines, those things leak. They rust and they leak, they crack and they leak. And so I think it's, especially if you're your own utility operator, it's real important to have some sensors in your system to be able to measure what your leakage is. have a good maintenance program of being able to CC, closed circuit TV, those primary lines, and then have a good investment in recapitalization of those lines. Quantity wise, we probably, when we were at full 100% consumption, I would say 10% of that, 8 to 10% of that was due to line leakage and line loss. That's a lot. And so, that's just the leakage. God forbid you actually have a water line break. You can lose 2 to 3 million gallons in the course of a couple hours, depending on the size of your line. So utility lines are very important. Fortunately, unless you're a large federal institution, like a military base, you normally don't own your own utility systems. But, your irrigation lines leak too. So it's just as important to pick the right materials that you're going to be using for those systems. It's very important.
Yeah, I think a lot of tribes actually own or are their own utilities, or their own water providers. So I think it's definitely relevant to the audience we have. Brian, I know you had to leave at 11 Pacific, so I want to respect your time and let you hop off as soon as you need to. Actually, Joanne, I want to ask, and thank you so much. I mean, this was, I think, extremely valuable information, and just also great work and saving that much water in an area that definitely needed it. So, really appreciate that. And we'll be. Go ahead.
Oh no, thanks for having me. I think what everyone's going to find is that nobody's going to be able to do this on their own. When you start talking about major water conservation, it takes a village. Anybody that's a stakeholder has got to be on board, and everybody's got to be pulling in the same direction, or it can go sideways on you in a hurry. So keep the lines of communication open. Make sure everybody understands their relevance in it. And I think most people understand that when they run out of water, they run out of water, and that tends to reside, especially in desert environments where water is a very precious resource.
Okay, thanks again, Brian. Really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
So Joanna, quick follow-up question is, he mentioned CalSense. Do you know the relationship between WaterSense and CalSense? And then just, yes. I guess, there may be other state programs as well.
Yes, they are a manufacturing partner. So those controllers are likely labeled. I don't know if they have all of their models labeled. I actually think they do. So, they promote their label, they're weather-based, they've been tested for performance. And that test method is to ensure those controllers water enough, but not too much. And if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty of how they do that, the test method is online and you can take a look. But I did want to mention, because that caught my attention, because I know that manufacturer, there are a wide variety of labeled products. There's CalSense, which is clearly for it can be very large properties, and they're very high tech. And a lot of those products can have a high price tag because of what they do. But there are also products for very small residential yards. So these products can be promoted to commercial facilities. They can be promoted for cities, bases, for example, or you can promote them to residential customers as well. They might do 4 zones, or some of those products may do over 50 zones or more than that. You can have multiple controllers talking to one weather station, for example.
Okay, so CalSense is a product, not so much a California spinoff of WaterSense. Are there state spinoffs of WaterSense maybe that are even receiving funding through the EPA, or just versions where they're offering their own resources in addition to California, or in addition to the EPA nationally?
There are no spinoffs as far as organizations go. There are a lot of partners. So I would say the majority of utilities in California are partners, and they have access to our resources. A lot of them rebate to WaterSense labeled products. So they'll say, we have rebates, but it has to be WaterSense labeled. and things like that. So, and of course the region is a partner, and they're very in tune with what WaterSense is doing as well.
All right, thank you. So Heidi and John, actually something that Brian had mentioned kind of made me think of both of you. Heidi, I believe, pretty sure that all of your water, at least within the reservation, is groundwater, aside from any tertiary that you're, or reclaim that you're using or seeking to use. And then John, I know, I believe that most, if not all of yours on the reservation is groundwater as well. How are you getting support and for the investments in needed upgrades for water conservation when technically you're not paying for water? So yeah, Heidi first, I would like to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, so it raises a good point, and I was going to talk about this a little bit when I was doing my spiel, because since our tribal members do not pay for water, and the tribe pays to run our water department, it's really difficult to get people on board with voluntary water conservation, unfortunately. And so we've been, the last decade that I've been working here, it's all been voluntary, like trying to get things passed, which has middling success. So we're kind of moving into a new phase right now. We just got a couple of BOR grants that I mentioned. It's under the BOR Water Smart program, which is an excellent, highly recommend everyone looking that up. Although it's only really, I think, Western states. But so we got funding to basically install smart water meters, which John already has, and we're copying his system because it seemed to work so well for his tribe. And then also to do real-time integrated groundwater level measurements, and a couple of other agricultural and irrigation efficiency projects that are all going to be funneled into like an online drought and water management tool, which will be accessible to our environmental office, our tribal council, our utilities department. So one of the things that I would say is our departments don't always kind of work together as, we don't communicate as well as we could, I think. So, so we're looking to integrate this stuff in a way that everyone will be on the same exact page and get the same exact measurements, and be able to have a decision-making tool that comes out of that. Right now, we get a lot of help. I try to get a lot of help from RCAC or IHS, and that can be in the form of like just technical assistance or technical advice. So when we have some issues, I usually try to reach out to those groups. So that's another good resource if you don't have the funding. Although you can get yourself on, you can get projects that are like water related or wastewater related onto the sanitary deficiency list through the EPA, and then that will kind of funnel you into some funding to do some implementation projects, and we've done that in the past too. So that's another resource that we've used. So,
Heidi, what does RCAC stand for again? I don't remember the full acronym.
I think
Rural
it's
Conservation
Assistance. Sorry, I am terrible with acronyms,
okay.
And it might be rural California. I'll look it up though.
Okay.
Yeah, it's.
Could you actually take, when you get a chance, a breather, if you could kind of put in the chat once you actually find it, just so we have that resource.
Yes. We'll do that.
And one thing I want to mention too, Prosper is working with Pala on a variety of initiatives. One thing we're working on is utilities codes, where right now people are not paying for water usage. So we're developing codes where they'll pay for water usage, and we have to navigate that when people weren't paying or were paying a set fee, and tribal members had, kind of, we're not paying fees. Like, how do we kind of continue to allow that, but have it capped and then have people pay above and beyond what's reasonable use, and basing those costs on what is kind of the surrounding water district related costs. So, it's really hard to incentivize and motivate people to reduce their water usage if they're not actually paying for or feeling it. And so hopefully we'll have the codes and regulations in place relatively soon that'll actually monetize that and make it incentivize conservation, landscapes, and beyond.
I should interject here, Josh, that so like with this BUR grant where we're installing smart water meters, they basically will enable each of our residents to actually look at how much water they're using right now, because that's some information that they do not have. So it's really difficult to ask people to conserve if they don't know A, how much water they're using, or B, how much should they be using, like how much is the average person using. So the idea, our kind of thought process right now is to give them a year where they're able to see how much they're using, and then by that point the codes will take place, and then we can start discussing how to charge that. And you're right, to do like a tiered system of, or something where, you know, like your first tier is free, then if you use above and beyond, then you pay for it. But because our tribal members have not had to pay for this up to this point, it's going to be a major education process. So one of the big tools for our community is to be able to understand how much they're actually using first. So I just wanted to interject that.
I'm going to physically raise my hand. Heidi actually just answered one of my questions about showing folks how much they use, because I think we at WaterSense find that most consumers, no matter where they are in the country, have no idea. And when they find out, they're shocked. And if they're in a place where water is scarce, they do care. So we have a couple messages. One is saving money, which I understand in your situation doesn't apply, and that's challenging. But I was wondering if the message of, you know, saving water for future generations or that type of messaging might resonate once they realize how much they're using, or that there's a, you know, a dire situation in some areas.
I would say that it's so dependent, you know, like every tribe is different with what's going to resonate with them. That messaging I have used in the past and has not gone over as well as I kind of initially expected it to. We also have some issues within our area where it's mixed messaging, because the majority of the state gets their water from either the Colorado River Project or the State Water Project. I think I just bungled those names, but so they get water from faraway areas. So when they're in drought, or when they're having, you know, like it's like statewide drought level messaging, or if the reservoirs elsewhere are full, then the state is told, oh, you're okay to start consuming water. We are completely separate because we're dependent on our groundwater, which is our sole source. So that mixed messaging can be really kind of complicated to explain in our area, and especially, you know, like when there's water coming out of your pipes and you haven't had that stop, that is, you know, like you might be able to tell someone logically that, you know, like the groundwater levels are dropping, and for future, you know, like future generations, we need to kind of conserve now, but it's been hard. A harder, yeah. So we tend to do a lot of fun things, well, which I can talk to a little bit later, but like water-wise landscaping is a fun way to sell water conservation. That's what we've kind of focused on.
Great.
And I'll just add to that too, that it's, you know, I mean, when you're looking, really trying to address the heavy high water users, which in a tribal community typically are the tribal government itself, and the tribal businesses. If there is no direct cost to water where they're buying from a local water district, I think the story revolves around the water basin. You know, at least in California, is, you know, what is that? How much water is in the aquifer? Having the studies to support what the usage is versus what the recharge is, and how quickly you're going to deplete that over time. You know, and making sure they're aware of that. If there is an overdraw or an overdraft that's going on right now, eventually the water is not going to be available, and you're going to have to pipe in water at this cost. So not only you have to pay this amount for water, you're going to probably have to then install all this infrastructure at, you know, how many ever millions of dollars to do so, and to really get that support at the kind of tribal council or decision maker level. John, do you want to add anything to this particular topic?
Hi, Josh. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. Yeah, my name is John Flores. I'm the Environmental Director and Water Manager for San Pasqual Band of Indians. Josh was somewhat correct. We get some of our water from groundwater, but actually the majority of our water we do purchase from utilities. We are tied in with Valley Center Municipal Water District and probably purchase about 70% of our water from them each year. So we actually do quite a bit of conservation because we have to pay for that water, and all residents pay for water on the reservation. And we are 100% metered on the reservation. We used to have your standard meters. Like Heidi said, we moved on to smart meters. Specifically, we're using AMI meters. So there's types of smart meters. You can go with either AMR, which is advanced meter reading, where like you might be driving by in your truck with like a little wand and it'll like capture each meter as you drive down the street. Or you can go to AMI, which is advanced meter infrastructure, where these meter reads don't require our water technicians to go out at all, and they're read through basically through the cellular infrastructure. Basically, they use low frequency cell towers to transmit their data. So they'll turn on once a day, and they'll do a data dump and download all the water use for that day and evening for the customers. It really helps us spot leaks on residential homes. We'll usually try to ping a customer, letting them know they may have a leak, or we'll go out there ourselves and just kind of look outside to see if it's like a leaky faucet or something on their home. And if there's nothing we can visually see outside, then we'll leave something on their door, like a door hanger, saying check inside your home, and you may have a leak. And then I have master keys, and so do my water technicians, so we can see everybody's usage. You can also set up, what I really like is you can set up alerts to the customer. So if it sees a leak going or water usage for 24 consecutive hours, it will email the customer and me saying you might have a leak. And then the customers usually check it. And we got that all funded through two pots of funding. One through Indian Health Service, like Heidi said, we used SBS, Sanitary Deficiency System, put in for a project to fund that. And then we also got funding through the California Prop 84, through the California Integrated Regional Water Management Board that we participate with. And we actually worked with RCAC, the Rural Corporation, it's a Rural Community Assistance Corporation, to put in a grant through IRWM for that. So we had these old meters that we'd have to physically read once a month. And so when people got their bill, if they had a water leak going for say 10, 15 days, a customer might have a bill of say almost $1,000 in water usage, depending on how large their leak was. So you can imagine that's a big surprise for the customer. We would work with the customer to do a payment program, but they would have to pay for that water, whether they used it or not. So the nice thing about these AMI meters now is they catch the leaks in basically real time as they're happening, so that way the customer doesn't get a big bill from us. And the way we bill out on the reservation is we have a monthly base fee that everybody pays regardless of how much water you use. That's just to be connected into our system and helps pay for the O&M of our system. Then we have a pumping / electrical fee. That's the cost to basically move water through our system to your house. And then lastly, we have actually the price of the water, which is about 5 cents, a little over 5 cents per cubic foot. 1 cubic foot of water is equal to 7.5 gallons approximately. So for basically a nickel, you get 7.5 gallons of water. So when you think about that, when we do outreach, I try to put up a visual usually of what does it cost for a gallon of gas in your area. Out here in California, it's almost $3, right? I think it was $2.85 or so when I filled up last, maybe, or $3.50. I don't remember what the price of gas is right now. And then what's the cost for a gallon of milk in your area? And then you can show a slide showing 7.5 gallons of water costs us basically a nickel. And that's some of the outreach I do with my community, to give them visuals of what 1 gallon costs of those sort of things. You hear me better now?
Yeah, you sound good. Mikey Strahl asked a question that I want to kind of pose to everybody. He said that he really liked what Joanna said about consumers not really knowing the full extent of how much water they're using. Besides the utility bill, how else would people better understand their use? And then what would be the top 3 or so most feasible ways that consumers could then cut back their water usage? So I'll open this up, Joanna, John, Heidi, or anybody else on that wants to, share.
I can jump in and say, because even though we're just now moving into the more technical kind of measurement of water conservation work, for the last 10, 15 years, I've really approached it, because it's all voluntary, from a more just kind of like how to do like good outreach to your community. And so a lot of the stuff that we've done have been small scale pilots, which kind of work pretty well at communicating to your residents how much water they might be able to save. So like when I do visuals, I focus a lot on like leak prevention in households, and I always make it visual of, like you don't really want to say like X, like one drip from your faucet is this amount of gallons, because that means nothing to people unless you can kind of present it in a visual way. So like using smart art or infographics, that's super easy to do nowadays. There's lots of resources online, you can make your own, but it's like that one leak will translate to a full-size pool in this amount of time. And that's something that people can understand really easily, that you can communicate to them, that they get it pretty quickly. I try to focus on how many places that there are potential leaks in your household to pay attention to, because that can be a big water saver for individuals. And we also have done a number of pilots, like rain barrel installations or rain garden installations. Also laundry to landscape, which is using gray water. So like the water from your washing machine, instead of sending it down to your sewer or your septic system, you can send it out to your landscape for like a secondary use. So we've used a lot of different grant funds to like just do small scale pilots over the years. So I think we've installed like 70 rain barrels in our community in the last like 6 or 7 years. We have 6. I just finished partnering with the local watershed council. We got a state grant to install some laundry to landscape, those kind of pilot programs. And so we've found a lot of success in just finding good partners within our community, people who are kind of maybe interested a little bit. And so once you can do a pilot on someone's property, then the next year, kind of just like spreading information by word of mouth, that's been a good tool for us. So that's just an idea.
Hey, John, do you have any thoughts on that topic?
No, just kind of what Heidi said. Try to use visuals, and that's what I try to just use, like I said, visuals on how quickly, like Heidi said, a leaky toilet will feel like a swimming pool. Really helps people, because the swimming pool is something a lot of people have or can visualize. So how many days an average leaky toilet will fill a swimming pool is usually a good one.
Another thing too, that if you don't have any data of like your own community's usage, you can always, there's averages that you can get from your state or just even national averages. There's lots of information from EPA's website, because I know that when I started, I would use either state averages or national averages. So, like a family of 4 people tends to use X amount of water. And so because I didn't have that specific for my Pala community, I would just use that average and kind of go from there. And it gives, it gives a place to start, and you can always refine it over the years and stuff. The other thing is when you're communicating actual like quantity of water, like the pool is a good one, but I also sometimes would use like landmarks within our own community of, like an acre field is kind of, most people don't know what that is. So I would do the math to be like, for this building, this is, like, you can kind of take the volume of it and figure out from there. But that's something that will resonate with your community, because it's something that they see all the time. So if you can do the math behind the scenes so that they don't have to, that's a good way to kind of translate it too.
And
like filling up the admin building.
Yeah. And we talk about water conservation and WaterSense and all that stuff, and it's great. I think one thing for any community getting started, if you're a tribal community and you don't have meters, I would strongly recommend putting meters in on your residential side. They're fairly inexpensive. You don't have to read them all the time either. You can read them monthly, quarterly, biannually. And there's a lot of grant funding out there for meters, Bureau of Reclamation. So like some of these other things that we've talked about today, there's not maybe a lot of grant funding out, or you may not have agriculture going on your community. And the majority of your use is probably residential use in households. So if you just put meters on, your homes, you'll have a good idea of what's going on with water loss in your system, and water waste, and then you can be more water efficient going on from there. So that's one takeaway I would go with. And then also kind of help in the future if you ever want to try to bill out for water. But in the beginning, it's a good way to have that infrastructure in there, and then you can always discuss, setting up billing for water usage, however, to add the income revenue coming into your community.
Thanks, Joanna.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in. I don't know if it's possible to share my screen. I would just give you the link, but I'm actually on the partner site. And we have materials that have exactly what Heidi was talking about. We can save you the math. We can save you the infographic development. They're there for partners. Partnering is free. It requires that you tell us what you're up to every year and let us know what WaterSense can do better if you're a promotional partner. It's free, it's easy. I'm looking at an infographic on leaks, and it has,
I just give you controls too, so you can share your screen if you like.
See here, where do I want to put this? I have two screens too, so if I'm not looking at you, forgive me. Let's do this one. Let me know if you all can see that.
Yes.
Okay. So this is just an example. WaterSense has a campaign that's Fix a Leak Week, and we've developed all of these infographics here. These are in files that partners can use to print for themselves. You can use them on social media. There are videos, there are graphics. I know I'm scrolling through these really quickly. There are games folks can play. There are files you can put on your own website. There is a lot of content we've developed over several years. This is Fix a Leak Week, but I was just looking. There's here's a page, for example, on sprinkler spruce up and all the materials that have been developed. So they're free and they're out there. And as Heidi said, it's not a specific, like, this is how much you're using exactly. But I think it gives people a sense like, oh, if I replace my toilet in a year, I'm saving X amount. And we've done the conversion to say, oh, you can fill a swimming pool 10 times or whatever that might be, to give someone a visual image of how much that can save them. And I would say replacing plumbing products, and I know I should be promoting landscaping, and I do, but it's a little bit more complicated. But replacing a toilet, replacing a faucet, replacing a shower head, those are very simple things that don't impact people's behavior. And that's why we try to make it easy with the label. So they know it works, it saves water, it's a fairly straightforward thing they can do. But we have all of these materials, again, for all of the campaigns that folks can use. So I encourage you, if you are working for a tribe and you're providing your own water, or you're purchasing water for someone else, or you have the opportunity to educate those that are using water, we have the materials that can help you do that. And it's free and simple. You can reach out to me if you want to join as a partner. You can just contact the helpline. It's a very brief one-page form. And if you want to talk more in detail about it, I'm happy to do so. And then I guess while I have you, I just had two more recommendations for folks that I thought of. Another organization that has a lot of information is called the Alliance for Water Efficiency. And they have, again, materials like we have. They have studies about rate structures, for example. I know someone was talking about that. The first whatever is a low rate, and then if you use above that. And utility, it's like a consortium of utility members too, and they all report back on what things work for them. We've done these programs and this worked, or this didn't work, or we really recommend you do this. There's free webinars that you can watch that give a lot of information on how to promote water efficiency that I think are super valuable. And then the other thing I was just going to mention is a conference called Water Smart Innovations. I don't know if anybody's been fortunate enough to be able to go, and this year it's virtual, which is great because it's free. And usually it's 3 days, lots of sessions. Utilities are giving talks. They're talking about AMI, rebate programs, landscaping programs. A lot of them sound very similar to what we heard earlier about projects and how much it cost and savings and what worked and what you need to do. All of those presentations from the past, I think that conference has been going on for 10 years, are on their website and free. So you can go search and look. And the folks that give the presentations are so happy to talk about what they've done. So you could reach out to them. This year, it's going to be 6 or 8 webinars every Wednesday starting soon, I think. And they're free, and I can send this information, but I think a lot of them will be quite relevant to what we've been talking about here. So that's another place you can look for resources.
Really quick, one last thing I want to bring up and ask, I think Joanna in particular, just because we're all located in the Southwest and more arid climates, but somebody asked, I know there's various folks from Maine and the Pacific Northwest. What would be some different considerations, if any, for those in areas that are they the same considerations just when they're in droughts? Or, I mean, certainly you always want to conserve water, but how do you message differently? What are the BMPs different for those areas? And then we'll conclude after this response.
Sure. I think it's a bit more challenging because it's not something people see every day if you're not in the Southwest. I think the person from Maine said, we know we're not in the Southwest, but we are having a drought, and that's messaging that you can try to get across. So WaterSense, for the most part, provides national messages. It's not just focused on drought. It's focused on saving water for future generations. I think cost, depending on their water rate structure, might spark their interest a little bit more than it could in other places as well. So I think those folks do have more of a challenge, but I think the messaging that we have, I'm pointing to my other screen, can help utilities, tribes across the country do that. Was there one, did I answer all of your question? Was there another piece to it?
No, I think that's it. And it's 11:30 Pacific right now, so I want to conclude and just as a reminder, we have next week we shift to energy for the webinar on Tuesday, and then another roundtable discussion that'll focus on energy storage on Thursday, and then we will conclude this webinar series the following Tuesday with training and implementation. I just wanted to thank everybody who both participated and joined us today, and everybody who contributed. Brian, I appreciate it. Scott, we'll send this along to him. But Joanna, thank you so much. I think you provided a ton of resources that I think will be valuable to everybody participating here. We're going to try to make all this information available on the website and develop really a resource list that people can go back to the links we mentioned and other links, resources we come across. Thank you so much. Thank you, Joanna. Thank you, Heidi. Thank you, John. Thanks, Brian, who's already left, and Scott and Michael for contributing, and thank you, everybody, for participating. Really appreciate it, everybody, and thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Jessica, for all of your support in making this whole project a reality. So, all right, everybody. Well, I appreciate it, and we will hopefully see you again on Tuesday.